The monitoring station sat on the edge of Nevada desert, where the night sky was so clear that Katie Miller could see stars without any telescope at all. But tonight she was not looking at stars with her naked eyes, because she was inside the building, staring at computer screens that showed signals from deep space. Katie had been working at the station for 3 years now, and most nights were boring with nothing but static and the occasional satellite ping to break the silence. But she loved her job because she always hoped that one day she might hear something extraordinary. She was 28 years old with brown hair that she kept in a messy bun and glasses that were always sliding down her nose as she leaned closer to examine, the data streams flowing across her monitors like rivers of numbers and symbols. The coffee maker in the corner gurgled as it finished brewing another pot, and Katie stood up to refill her mug for the 5th time that night, because caffeine was the only thing keeping her alert during these long shifts when she was the only person in the building. Outside, the desert wind howled against the walls of the station, making the metal structure creak. But Katie was used to these sounds, and they had become a strange comfort during her solitary work hours. She sat back down at her desk and adjusted her headphones, which were connected to the massive radio telescope array that stretched across the desert floor like giant metal flowers reaching toward the cosmos. The clock on the wall showed 3 in the morning, and Katie yawned as she cycled through different frequencies, checking for any unusual patterns or signals that might indicate something more than just cosmic background noise. Suddenly, her screen lit up with a pattern she had never seen before, and her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips as she stared at the display, trying to understand what she was looking at. The signal was structured and repetitive, which meant it was not random noise from a pulsar or dying star. But the frequency and modulation were completely foreign to any human technology she knew about. Katie set down her mug with shaking hands and began recording everything while her mind raced through possibilities, because this could be equipment malfunction or interference from a classified military satellite. But deep in her gut, she knew this was different. She ran the signal through every translation program and decoder in their system, but nothing worked, until she tried something crazy and fed it through a basic pattern recognition algorithm that was designed for teaching computers to understand human speech. The screen flickered, and then words appeared in broken English that made her heart skip several beats as she read them over and over to make sure she was not imagining things. "Help us, please, anyone who can hear this. We are dying. Please help us. Our ship is broken, and we have no power left. Please, someone answer us. We beg you." Katie grabbed her phone to call her supervisor, but stopped because she knew he would not believe her without proof. So instead she began typing a response using the same frequency modulation as the incoming signal. "This is Earth Monitoring Station 17 responding. To your distress call, we hear you. Please provide your location and the nature of your emergency. We will try to help." She sent the message into space knowing it could take hours or even days for it to reach whoever was out there, and even longer for a response to come back if they could understand her at all. While she waited, Katie began analyzing the signal more carefully and discovered that it contained embedded data about stellar positions, which gave her a rough idea of where it was coming from. The location was far beyond anything humans had explored before, in a region of space that their telescopes had barely mapped. But the signal strength suggested the source was moving closer to Earth, though still impossibly far away. Katie printed out everything and began preparing a report for her supervisors, because she knew that when morning came and people arrived at work, her life would change forever. She thought about all the movies she had watched about first contact with aliens and how they usually showed massive government responses with military involvement and scientists arguing about protocols. But right now, in this moment, it was just her alone in the desert, talking to someone or something that needed help, and that felt both terrifying and amazing at the same time. The sun was starting to rise over the mountains when her screen lit up again with another message, and this time it was longer and more complex with better grammar, as if the sender had been learning from her response. "Thank you for answering. We are ship of scientists, 40 females from world. You would not know. We study stars, but our engine failed after accident. We drift now for many cycles. Our air grows thin." Katie typed back immediately, asking for more information about their ship and how many days of life support they had left, while part of her mind still wondered if this was really happening. "We have maybe 30 of your Earth days before air runs out. We can send you our coordinates, but we do not know if your ships can reach us. We are very far from your world." The conversation continued as the sun climbed higher, and Katie forgot about being tired as she learned that the aliens called themselves the Kalari, and they had been on a research mission when their faster-than-light drive had malfunctioned. They had heard stories about Earth and humans from other species they had encountered, but had never made contact before, and they were desperate enough to try broadcasting on frequencies they thought humans might monitor. Katie promised them that she would get help and that humans would find a way to reach them, even though she had no idea if that was actually possible, given the vast distance involved. By the time her supervisor Tom arrived at 8 in the morning, Katie had compiled 50 pages of transcripts and data that proved beyond any doubt that she was communicating with an alien spacecraft. Tom Bradley looked at Katie like she had lost her mind when she showed him the transcripts, but his expression changed when he saw the data and heard the recordings that could not be faked or explained away as anything other than real. Within 2 hours, the small monitoring station was crowded with people from NASA and the Space Force and the Department of Defense, all talking at once, while Katie sat at her desk, still communicating with the Kalari ship. The alien woman she was talking to, most was named Zara, who seemed to be their leader, or at least their communications officer, and she was learning English remarkably fast, adapting to human speech patterns with each exchange. General Patricia Stone took charge of the situation and surprised everyone by putting Katie in charge of maintaining contact with the aliens, since she had established the first connection and seemed to have gained their trust. The biggest problem was the distance, because even their fastest unmanned probes would take years to reach the coordinates the Kalari had provided, and a manned mission seemed impossible with current technology. But then Dr. Lisa Chang from the Experimental Propulsion Laboratory mentioned something about a prototype engine they had been developing that could theoretically fold space and reduce travel time to months instead of years. The engine had never been tested on a full-size ship, and many scientists said it was too dangerous. But Katie volunteered immediately, saying she would go alone if that was what it took to save these people. General Stone studied Katie for a long moment, then made a decision that would change history by authorizing the mission and giving Katie command of it since she was the only one the aliens seemed to trust. They had 6 weeks to prepare the ship and train a crew, while Katie continued talking to Zara every day, learning about their culture and biology, and trying to keep their spirits up as their situation grew worse. The Kalari were rationing everything now, and Zara admitted that some of the younger scientists were getting sick from the lack of proper air. Though she tried to sound optimistic when she talked, Katie learned that the Kalari were explorers and scientists who had been traveling the galaxy for generations, studying stellar phenomena and collecting knowledge which they considered the highest pursuit. They were physically different from humans, with purple-tinted skin and 4 arms that gave them advantages in their scientific work, but their emotions and fears were remarkably similar to human ones. Zara told Katie about her homeworld, with its 3 moons and cities built into living trees that grew for thousands of years, creating natural skyscrapers that housed millions of people. She talked about her family and how she had left them behind to join this mission because she wanted to see a binary star collision that only happened once every 10,000 years. Katie shared stories about Earth and human culture and was surprised when Zara laughed at her jokes, even though humor was supposed to be unique to each species. The ship they were preparing for Katie was called the Phoenix, and it was being fitted with the experimental drive, plus every piece of rescue equipment they could manage to install in the limited time. General Stone assigned Katie a crew of 3 other women because psychological profiles suggested an all-female crew would work better in the confined space for the long journey. Lisa Chang volunteered to be the engineer since she knew the experimental drive better than anyone and could fix it if something went wrong during the journey. Amy Roberts came on as the medical officer, bringing equipment that had been modified based on what they learned about Kalari biology from the information Zara had transmitted. The 4th crew member was Maria Santos, who was both a pilot and a linguist who could help with communication if the translation systems failed. For any reason, they trained 18 hours a day learning every system on the Phoenix and running simulations of everything that could go wrong during the mission, from engine failures to first contact protocols. Katie barely slept anymore, spending her days training and her nights talking to Zara, who was starting to sound weaker. even though she tried to hide it behind cheerful conversation. 2 weeks before launch, Zara sent a video transmission which was the first visual contact between the species, and Katie gasped when she saw the alien woman for the first time. Zara was beautiful in an otherworldly way with large silver eyes and delicate features, and her forearms moved with a grace that seemed almost like dancing when she gestured. The purple tint to her skin was subtle and seemed to shimmer in the light of their ship, and when she smiled it was recognizable as a smile, even though her mouth was slightly different from a human's. Behind Zara, Katie could see other Kalari women working at control panels, and she noticed how thin they all looked and how slowly they moved as they conserved their energy. Some of them waved at the camera with their multiple arms, and Katie waved back, feeling a connection across the impossible distance between them that transcended species barriers. The video calls became regular after that, and the Phoenix crew got to know many of the Kalari scientists, who each had their own personalities and quirks. Despite being aliens, there was Lyra, who was young and enthusiastic and wanted to know everything about Earth music, after Katie had played them some songs over the communication system. There was Vera, who was older and more serious, but who had a dry sense of humor that reminded Katie of her grandmother who had passed away years ago, and there was Nix, who was an engineer like Lisa, and who spent hours discussing technical problems with the human crew, trying to help them understand Kalari technology. The launch date approached quickly, and Katie found herself standing on the platform looking at the Phoenix, which would be her home for the next several months. The ship was not large by military standards, but it was packed with the most advanced technology humanity had ever produced, including the untested drive that would either save lives or kill them all. General Stone gave a speech about the historic nature of the mission, and how Katie and her crew were representing all of humanity in this first rescue attempt of an alien species. But Katie was not thinking about history or representing humanity as she climbed aboard the Phoenix, because she was thinking about Zara and the others running out of air in the cold darkness of space. The launch of the Phoenix was broadcast to every screen on Earth, as 6 billion people watched Katie and her crew blast off into the unknown, on a mission that many scientists said was impossible. The first week of travel was rough as they adjusted to life in the cramped quarters of the ship and tested all the systems while moving through familiar space near Earth. Lisa spent most of her time monitoring the experimental drive and making small adjustments based on readings that only she fully understood, while muttering to herself in a mix of English and Mandarin. Amy organized the medical bay and studied everything they knew about Kalari biology, which was not much, but she had brought equipment that could analyze and adapt to different physiologies. Maria worked on improving the translation software and creating backup communication systems in case their primary method failed when they actually met the aliens face to face. Katie divided her time between commanding the ship and talking to Zara, whose messages were taking longer to arrive as the Phoenix moved further from Earth communication relays. The experimental drive activated on day 10 of their journey, and Katie held her breath as Lisa initiated the sequence that would fold space around them if it worked correctly. The ship shuddered and the lights flickered, and for a moment Katie thought they were going to explode. But then everything stabilized and the stars outside looked different. They had jumped forward, covering a distance that should have taken months in just seconds, but the drive needed time to recharge before they could jump again. Each jump took them further from home and closer to the Kalari ship, and Katie noticed that the crew had stopped talking about Earth in the past tense and started focusing entirely on the mission. On day 23, they received a message from Zara that made Katie cry, because 3 of the Kalari scientists had fallen into comas from oxygen deprivation and they did not have medical equipment to help them. Katie pushed Lisa to make the drive recharge faster, even though the engineer warned that they were already exceeding safe parameters and risking a catastrophic failure. They jumped again and again, each time getting closer to the coordinates, while the strain on the ship and crew grew more intense with every fold in space. Maria started teaching everyone basic Kalari phrases she had learned from analyzing their communications, though the 4 armed gestures were impossible for humans to replicate properly. Amy prepared her medical equipment and created treatment plans based on theoretical models of how Kalari biology might respond to various interventions. On day 35, they received what might be the last message from the Kalari ship, as Zara reported that half the crew was now unconscious, and the rest were barely functioning. Katie made the decision to attempt 3 jumps in rapid succession, which Lisa said would probably destroy the drive but might get them close enough to reach the aliens with conventional engines. The first jump went smoothly, but the second caused explosions in 2 secondary systems that Maria and Amy rushed to repair, while Lisa kept the drive from melting down. The third jump nearly tore the Phoenix apart, and when they emerged from folded space, the experimental drive was dead and smoking, but they could see the Kalari ship on their screens. It was massive and beautiful in a way that human ships were not, with curved surfaces that seemed to flow like water frozen in space and symbols that glowed with soft bioluminescent light. But large sections were dark, and Katie could see debris floating around hull breaches that told the story of whatever accident had stranded them in deep space. Katie suited up in her EVA gear and prepared to make the first physical contact between humans and aliens, while her crew worked to bring the Phoenix alongside the larger ship. The airlock on the Kalari ship was different from human designs, but Maria had studied their technical transmissions and figured out how to interface with their systems. Katie floated through the tunnel between ships with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her helmet and medical supplies strapped to her back. The inner door opened and Katie stepped into an alien ship for the first time in human history, breathing recycled air as she removed her helmet in the low oxygen environment. Zara was waiting for her, barely standing and supported by 2 of her forearms against the wall, but she was smiling, and her silver eyes were bright with tears. Katie moved forward and caught her as she collapsed, and was surprised by how light the alien woman was, as if her bones were less dense than human ones. Amy and the others rushed in with oxygen tanks and medical equipment and began treating the unconscious Kalari scientists who were scattered throughout the corridor. The conscious aliens watched with amazement as the humans worked with desperate efficiency to save lives they had never encountered before. Today, Amy discovered that human oxygen masks could be modified to fit Kalari faces, and soon the unconscious aliens were breathing properly. For the first time in weeks, Lisa and Maria worked with Nix and the other conscious Kalari engineers to repair their life support systems, using a combination of human spare parts and alien technology. It took 6 hours to stabilize the situation, and by then most of the Kalari were conscious again, though weak and exhausted from their ordeal. Zara held Katie's hand with 2 of her arms and spoke in broken English, mixed with her own language, saying, "Thank you," over and over, while tears ran down her purple cheeks. Katie realized that despite all the differences in appearance and biology, these were people just like humans with fears and hopes and the capacity for gratitude. The 2 crews worked together for the next 3 days, repairing the Kalari ship enough to make it functional, though it would never achieve faster than light travel again. During that time, bonds formed between the species as they shared meals and stories and found common ground in their love of exploration and discovery. Lyra played Earth music on Kalari instruments, creating sounds that no human had imagined, while Maria learned their written language and discovered it was based on mathematical principles. Vera and Amy exchanged medical knowledge and found that many treatments could work across species with minor modifications that neither had considered before. Nix and Lisa became friends despite the language barrier, bonding over their shared frustration with equipment that never worked quite the way it was supposed to. The journey back to Earth would take 3 months using conventional engines, since the Phoenix's experimental drive was completely destroyed, and the Kalari ship could only manage sublight speeds. Katie made the decision to tow the alien vessel, using cables that Lisa and Nix had reinforced with a combination of human steel and Kalari biometal that was somehow stronger than either material alone. The 2 ships moved through space like an unlikely pair of dancers connected by glowing tethers that stretched between them, carrying power and communication signals. During the long journey home, the 2 crews essentially became one with humans and Kalari, moving freely between the ships and working together on various projects. Zara spent most of her time on the Phoenix learning everything she could about human culture and helping Maria create a comprehensive translation program for their languages. She told Katie about the galactic community that humans had never known existed, with hundreds of species spread across the galaxy, each with their own unique perspectives. Some species were warriors who valued strength above all, while others were philosophers who spent centuries contemplating single questions about existence and meaning. The Kalari were known as the Recorders because they traveled everywhere, collecting knowledge and preserving the history of species that had risen and fallen over millions of years. They had libraries on their homeworld that contained the complete cultural archives of 17 extinct civilizations that would have been lost forever without their efforts. Zara explained that many species had been watching Earth for decades, waiting to see if humans were ready to join the galactic community, or if they would destroy themselves first. The fact that humans had risked everything to save strangers would be seen as proof that Earth was ready, though some species would still be skeptical. Katie asked why no one had made contact before, and Zara said there were strict rules about interfering with developing species until they reached certain technological and social milestones. But emergency situations like this created exceptions to the rules, and now that contact had been made, there was no going back to the way things were before. On the Kalari ship, Amy was working with their medical team to treat the long-term effects of oxygen deprivation and making remarkable discoveries about universal biological principles. She found that certain healing techniques the Kalari used could accelerate human cell regeneration and might lead to cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. The Kalari were equally fascinated by human resilience and adaptability, noting that humans could survive injuries that would kill most other species they knew about. Vera told Amy about a warrior species called the Thrakari, who had once claimed to be the toughest in the galaxy until they saw footage of humans doing extreme sports for fun. Lisa and Nix had become an unstoppable engineering team and were designing improvements to both ships that incorporated the best of both technologies. They discovered that Kalari biometal could self-repair when exposed to certain frequencies, and human electronics could be made far more efficient using Kalari crystal matrices. Together, they were sketching plans for a new type of ship that would be faster and stronger than anything either species had built before. Maria was having the time of her life, learning not just the Kalari language but also bits and pieces of dozen other alien languages they had records of. She discovered that many alien species communicated through methods humans had never considered, like color changes or electromagnetic pulses or controlled gravity fluctuations. The Kalari language itself was fascinating because it incorporated mathematical concepts directly into grammar so that complex equations could be spoken as naturally as poetry. Lyra had started a cultural exchange that had both crews sharing art and music and food. Though some combinations worked better than others, human spicy food was apparently lethal to most Kalari, while their fermented fruit drinks had an unexpected, hallucinogenic effect on humans that Amy had to treat twice. But they found common ground in music, with Lyra teaching Katie how to play a Kalari instrument that used all four arms to create harmonies humans had never imagined. The instrument looked like a cross between a harp and a pipe organ, but made of living wood that responded to touch by changing its resonance. Katie learned that music was sacred to the Kalari because they believed it was the fundamental language of the universe that all matter understood at a quantum level. As they got closer to Earth, the reality of what was about to happen started to sink in for both crews, and everyone grew more nervous. Katie was in constant communication with General Stone, who was coordinating the largest diplomatic welcome in human history with representatives from every nation. The president had already addressed the world 3 times, preparing people for the arrival of proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Some people were excited, while others were terrified, but most were simply curious about what the aliens would be like and what they could teach humanity. Zara was nervous too because she would be the first Kalari ambassador to Earth, and she knew that her words and actions would shape how humans saw her entire species. She spent hours with Katie practicing speeches and learning about human customs, so she would not accidentally offend anyone when they arrived. The other Kalari were divided between excitement about seeing a new world and worry about whether humans would actually accept them or turn hostile. Katie assured them that while some humans might be afraid at first, the overwhelming response would be positive because humans were naturally curious and generally kind. 1 month from Earth, they received a transmission from the Galactic Council acknowledging that humanity had passed its first test by showing compassion to strangers. The message was formal and diplomatic, but essentially welcomed Earth to the larger community and promised that official representatives would arrive within 1 Earth year. It also contained warnings about certain aggressive species that humanity should avoid and coordinates for safe trading posts where humans could learn about galactic commerce, Katie realized that her simple decision to answer a distress call had changed the course of human history forever, and the weight of that responsibility was overwhelming. But when she looked at Zara and the other Kalari who were alive because of her choice, she knew she would make the same decision again without hesitation. Earth grew larger in their viewports each day until they could see the blue marble that was home, surrounded by satellites and space stations that suddenly seemed primitive compared to what they had learned. The International Space Station had been expanded into a massive reception area where the first official meeting between humans and Kalari would take place in full view of the world. Katie stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, with Zara beside her as they approached Earth orbit, and hundreds of human vessels formed an honor guard around them. Fighter jets flew in formation, creating smoke trails in the colors of every nation, while the space stations lit up with welcome messages in both English and the Kalari language Maria had taught them. The docking was perfect, and Katie led the combined crew through the airlock where General Stone was waiting with diplomats and scientists from around the world. Zara stepped forward with all four arms spread in a gesture of peace and spoke, in carefully practiced English that brought tears to many eyes. She said that the Kalari came in friendship and gratitude, and that humanity had proven itself worthy of joining the galactic community through an act of selfless compassion. The president spoke next, welcoming the Kalari to Earth and promising that this was the beginning of a new chapter in human history, filled with cooperation and discovery. Then came weeks of careful meetings and cultural exchanges as the Kalari were introduced to human society in controlled stages to avoid overwhelming either species. Zara and 5 others appeared at the United Nations, where they were given honorary citizenship of Earth and promised assistance in healing their ship. The Kalari shared some of their vast knowledge, including star maps that showed habitable worlds and warnings about dangerous regions of space humans should avoid. They gave humanity plans for water purification systems that could make any water drinkable and agricultural, techniques that could grow food in the harshest environments. In exchange, humans offered something the Kalari had not expected, which was a fresh perspective on problems they had been trying to solve for centuries. Lisa and Nix's hybrid engineering had already revolutionized Kalari technology, and human creativity was providing new solutions to old challenges. Amy's medical discoveries were being studied by scientists worldwide, and early trials suggested that Kalari healing techniques could indeed cure certain cancers. The cultural exchange was even more remarkable as humans and Kalari found they shared many fundamental values despite their different evolutionary paths. Both species valued family and community and learning, and both had myths and legends about reaching for the stars to find meaning. Lyra performed concerts where she played human and Kalari music together, creating something entirely new that moved audiences to tears with its beauty. Artists from both species began collaborating on works that combined human emotion with Kalari mathematical precision, producing art that transcended cultural boundaries. Maria published the first human Kalari dictionary and language learning programs that would allow the species to communicate without translation devices. 3 months after their arrival, the Kalari ship was fully repaired with human upgrades and ready to return home. Though several crew members asked to stay, Lyra wanted to study at Earth music schools, while Vera hoped to work with Amy on medical research, and Nix had dozens of engineering projects with Lisa. Zara was appointed as the official Kalari ambassador to Earth and would remain to coordinate the growing relationship between the two species. Katie was offered any position she wanted but chose to return to her monitoring station in the desert. Though now with a very different job, she would lead Earth's new deep space communication center, using upgraded equipment that could reach across the galaxy to communicate with other species. The goodbye ceremony was broadcast to both worlds as the Kalari ship prepared to depart, carrying human ambassadors who would visit their world. Katie hugged Zara, carefully aware of all 4 arms wrapping around her as they said goodbye, knowing they would see each other again soon. The Kalari ship left orbit slowly, and Katie watched from her station as it disappeared into a jump that human scientists were still trying to understand within a year. Earth had built its first faster-than-light ship, using the hybrid technology Lisa and Nix had developed during the rescue mission. Katie was chosen to captain this ship on its maiden voyage to the Kalari homeworld, where humans would be formally introduced to the Galactic Council. The crew included Lisa and Amy and Maria, along with new members who had trained in alien protocols and technologies that were becoming commonplace. When they arrived at the Kalari world, Katie gasped at the beauty of cities built into living trees that stretched into the clouds with bioluminescent lights. Zara was there to greet them, having arrived weeks earlier, and she showed them wonders beyond human imagination, including the libraries of dead civilizations. But what struck Katie most was how normal it all felt, as if humans had always belonged among the stars and had just been waiting for an invitation. She thought back to that night in the desert, when she had answered a distress call, not knowing it would change everything for both species. The Galactic Council met them with ceremony and formally welcomed humanity as the newest members of the galactic community. They spoke of how rare it was for a species to pass the compassion test on their first encounter and how this boded well for humanity's future. Other species began arriving at Earth, bringing trade and knowledge and warnings about the dangers that lurked in the darker corners of space. Some came as friends, while others came as curious observers wanting to understand these humans who had surprised everyone with their actions. Katie became the first human admiral of a mixed-species fleet, dedicated to rescue operations throughout the galaxy, saving lives, regardless of species. She never forgot that moment when she chose to answer a call for help, and how that simple human instinct had opened the universe to Earth. Years passed and humanity spread across the stars, but they never lost the quality that had earned them respect, which was the willingness to help others. The story of Katie and the Kalari became legend told on 100 worlds as proof that compassion could bridge any gap between species, and in the desert of Nevada the monitoring station still operated, but now it listened for distress calls from across the galaxy, ready to send help. Because that was what humans did when someone needed help. They answered the call no matter how far or how dangerous the journey might be. Katie eventually retired to Earth, where she taught new generations of explorers about the importance of kindness in the vast darkness of space. She would tell them that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their courage, but their ability to see strangers as friends waiting to be made.